The Italian Invasion of Abyssinia, 1935 through 1936. At 5 a.m. on the 3rd of October 1935, Italian forces crossed into Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, signaling the start of the Second Italian-Abyssinian War. The war's outcome would not only change the face of Africa, but the political rifts it caused between the fascist nations and the democratic nations would contribute to the beginning of the most devastating conflict the human race has ever known, the Second World War. The invasion wasn't something which had just developed overnight. It signaled the end of years of Italian frustration following their defeat at the hands of Abyssinia in the 1896 Battle of Adwa, which was the worst defeat ever inflicted on a European power in Africa. The Battle of Adwa saw 6,000 Italian troops lose their lives and remained a painful memory in the Italian national consciousness. Benito Mussolini, Italy's fascist dictator, saw himself as a modern-day Julius Caesar, ready to carve out a new Roman Empire. During the 1920s, this saw him brutally subjugate the existing Italian colonies of Libya, Somalia, and Eritrea. But national issues prevented him from invading Abyssinia, which formed a wedge between Italy's East African colonies. However, by 1932, following the celebrations that marked a decade of fascist rule and needing to distract the Italian people from the problems of the Depression of the 1930s, Mussolini's attention turned to the East African kingdom. By 1934, he told his government to prepare for the total conquest of Abyssinia. The excuse for such an invasion came in December 1934 following a skirmish near an oasis at Walwal on the Abyssinian border. Abyssinia and Italy were both members of the League of Nations, an organization set up following the First World War to settle disputes amongst nations at the conference table rather than the battlefield. Haile Selassie called upon the League for arbitration, but the League decided not to attribute blame to either side and to exonerate both nations of any wrongdoing, which was to prove a grim foreshadowing of the League's handling of the entire Italian invasion. The reason for the League's impotence stemmed from France and Britain's hopes that by not punishing Italy, they could hope to gain Mussolini's help in the impending war with Nazi Germany. While this may seem strange in retrospect, in 1934 the alliances of World War II were far from set in stone, with the Italian dictator distrusting Adolf Hitler, particularly over his plans to annex Austria, which bordered northern Italy and was led by Mussolini's protege, Engelbert Dollfuss. In addition, it provided Mussolini with renewed confidence as he stepped up Italy's rearmament program. Particular attention was paid to the development and stockpiling of chemical weapons, which had been used in Italy's pacification of Libya. Chemical weapons were used to deadly effect against the loosely dressed Abyssinian warriors and civilians. One chemical weapons factory established near Mogadishu in Somalia produced no fewer than 17 warehouses worth of chemical weapons. Further stores of chemical weapons were maintained in the Libyan cities of Benghazi and Tripoli. The blister agent, sulfur mustard, was the most commonly used chemical weapon in the war. In addition to chemical agents, vast quantities of more conventional arms were also produced and transported. 6,000 machine guns, 2,000 artillery pieces, 600 tanks, and 450 aircraft, including 200 bombers. Up to the date of the invasion, the shipments of arms and men to Italian ports in Eritrea and Somalia increased 4 times. All in all, some 650,000 Italian soldiers were dispatched to Abyssinia. Added to this deadly technological cocktail were the thousands of indigenous troops recruited in the Italian colonies, serving to bolster their forces even further. It was this tidal wave of men and machines that invaded Abyssinia without a formal declaration of war on the morning of October 3, 1935. 3 days later, the shame of Adwa had been wiped out as the aircraft of the Italian Royal Air Force bombed the town into submission. The Ethiopian army, on the other hand, numbered around 500,000 men, only a quarter of which had military training, and was feudal in organization, with soldiers owing personal loyalty to individual warlords. Ethiopian troops were armed with an assortment of rifles in varying conditions. The Air Force was near non-existent, and artillery and machine guns were scarce. Despite the obvious technical advantage of tanks and aircraft, the Italian troops still had to conquer an almost impassable country. As there were few roads, the initial Italian advance soon became bogged down, and it was difficult to keep the vast army adequately supplied, as each desert, mountain, and gorge presented itself as a natural defensive obstacle. Thanks to this initial setback, Abyssinian morale was still high. In December 1935, Haile Selassie issued a call to arms. Everyone will now be mobilized, and all boys old enough to carry a spear will be sent to the capital, Addis Ababa. Married men will take their wives to carry food and cook. Those without wives will take any woman without a husband. He chose to exempt only mothers with infants and the blind, those who could not walk, and for any other reason could not carry a spear. He also issued a deadly warning to those who did not rally to the flag. Anyone found at home after the receipt of this order will be hanged. With renewed resolve, the people rallied to Selassie's call. Alongside launching a renewed offensive, Selassie appealed to the League of Nations. The League responded by condemning the Italian invasion. Furthermore, the majority of the League's members voted to impose economic sanctions upon Italy. However, economic sanctions led to a wave of defiance across Italy, and the population pledged their support to the conflict. It took 6 weeks for the sanctions to be organized, and when implemented, did not include a ban on oil, which was the one sanction that would have had a major impact on Italy's war effort. Britain and France's efforts to maintain good relations with Mussolini proposed a negotiated settlement to the war, which greatly favored the Italians. The Hoare-Laval Pact saw Britain and France suggest Italy could have 2 large regions of Abyssinia in return for a ceasefire. When leaked to the French press, the plan drew immediate public condemnation and was denounced by the Ethiopians. It was publicly known that Italy was using deadly chemical weapons in Ethiopia, with many in Britain and France seeing the pact as doing a deal with evil. Following the December offensive, Mussolini grew impatient with his army's progress. He sacked the campaign's commander, General De Bono, and replaced him with Marshal Badoglio, who had demonstrated his willingness to use brutal force in Libya. Following his appointment, Mussolini sent a telegram to Badoglio authorizing him to employ any kind of gas, even on a massive scale. Often sprayed as vapor from the air, the sulfur mustard created a burning rain that the Abyssinian forces had no defense against. Moreover, 1,000 heavy bombs of chemical weapons were fired at enemy positions in the 3 months following Badoglio's promotion. Despite fierce resistance, by late April 1936, Italian forces were finally able to meet the last Abyssinian army at the Battle of Ogaden. In the next 10 days of bitter fighting, the last organized force between the invaders and the Ethiopian capital were defeated. On the 5th of May, Badoglio drove the head of his force into the capital, Addis Ababa, as the remaining inhabitants watched on sullenly. A testament to the war's popularity in Italy was that more than 30 million people packed the country's piazzas for victory celebrations. Haile Selassie had managed to escape 3 days before and addressed the League of Nations on the invasion of his country. He remained in exile until Abyssinia was liberated by the British and Allied forces in 1941. Italy withdrew its delegation from the League and formally left in 1937. Hitler, meanwhile, defied the League by taking advantage of the Abyssinian crisis when he reoccupied the Rhineland in March 1936. The Italian army had won a victory that Mussolini's biographer, Renzo De Felice, described as the dictator's masterpiece. For Mussolini, the war created a form of national consensus as he and his regime increased in popularity. The campaign also gave a clear demonstration to the world of the ineffectualness of the League of Nations, which was to carry profound consequences as it undermined the ideas of collective security and propelled Mussolini into an ever closer relationship with Adolf Hitler. Hey guys, check out this Simple History merch on Teespring. There's t-shirts, mugs, stickers, phone cases, and much more. Link in the description below.